Hello. So, I'm Elliot, for those of you that don't already know me. I'm sat in Black Bess. This is my lovely 1956 Vauxhall. Those of you that have already read the blog all know that we're doing this, or I'm doing this to raise awareness for Mind, the charity that supports people with mental ill health problems. And with it being Mental Health Awareness Week, I thought it was a really good opportunity just to talk about why I chose Mind, what mental health has meant for me, what my story is. And also it's a really good opportunity for me to practice vlogging. I've not really done very much of it, although I have noticed when my posts online have included videos, they tend to get a little bit more interest than just the written stuff. So go easy on me. This is probably quite a difficult topic to have picked as a starter, but hey ho, in for a penny. So why am I doing this for Mind? So I have personal experiences with mental health issues, and I'm going to go into a bit of that today. Some of this might be a little bit difficult to listen to. Some of it might be a bit difficult to say. But I want to make sure that colleagues and friends and family that have issues like this feel that they've got support, feel that there's a relative normality around this kind of issue. I've supported colleagues at work that have had mental ill health problems. I've also got close friends that struggle with this quite frequently, and members of the family as well that have struggled with this in the past, and no doubt will have future challenges as well. So why am I sharing all of this? Well, it's really important to destigmatise mental health. Often guys, men in particular, don't talk about how they feel. But it's not limited to one sex, and especially in the workplace. As an advocate of LGBT plus in the workplace and the community, it's important to recognise there's some kind of scary facts around that as well. Specifically, 52% of that community experienced some kind of mental ill health problem in the last 12 months. That's remarkably higher than the general population. And as I've already mentioned, it's kind of important to share your story. It helps to normalise it and understand how to deal with it. A little bit like treating a broken bone, you know, you don't hide the fact that you've broken your leg. You don't hide the fact that you've got a cast on. So it always feels a bit odd to me that we take that kind of approach with mental health. So what's my story? Well, it all started back in 2009, probably late 2008. I met a guy at a car show. We got chatting on a forum. We met. We fell in love. It had its challenges. Neither of us were out to everyone. It was more of a challenge for him than it was for me. But we got each other through that. When I met, I knew that he'd been ill in the past, like seriously ill. And in fact, he was still recovering from that when we first met. And I guess I knew in the back of my head, it was always a risk that someone who's been so seriously and life-threateningly ill might get ill again. But you have to hope for the best, and we did, and we started making plans, building a home, looking at relocating, all of that good stuff. And you know what's coming, like a train crash, that disease came back. It hit him harder, more ferociously, and faster than it had ever done before. And it turned out this would be the third and final fight that he was going to have with that particular disease. Through rounds of treatment and over a few long months, we clung to hope. And it was like I always used to think it was like we were hanging on a cliff, like me holding on to the edge and him holding on to me underneath, and both of us fighting not to lose grip. Him on me on him, and me on the edge of that cliff. And with every failed treatment attempt, it felt like one of our fingers would slip from each other's hands. So September 2010, I remember that really vividly. The day we sat in a white room with people in white uniforms, and they told us that the disease was still there, that every option that we had been used up, and that all that was left was to await the inevitable, and try to enjoy the time that we had left with each other. Which is difficult to hear, inevitably. It's the moment hanging on the edge of the cliff that you realise that you're not going to get back onto solid land, and that you are going to fall, and it's just a matter of when are you going to fall, and holding off for as long as you possibly can. As he started to contextualise his very mortality, I started to contextualise my mental stability, and the whole process of treatment, testing results, had been an anxiety-inducing experience. And I tried not to let that develop into stress, but seeing someone that you love being genuinely scared of every meeting, of every set of results, of the effects of every new drug, it does take its toll. It does cause you to feel stress and anxiety, and obviously the effects of every new drug and the increasing possibility of death inevitably can take you into quite a dark place. I knew I was struggling. I knew that I had to be careful. But at the same time, I knew that I couldn't falter too much. He was relying on me to keep him anchored to that cliff edge. He had no control over that. And that was kind of the role that I had. But I remember it all came into sharp focus for me in IKEA. It was the day that one of my fingers slipped from the edge of the cliff. And we were just walking around, just looking for a few practical items to help make life a little bit more comfortable. And we observed people, couples, families, young people, elderly people, all busy buying stuff for their homes. And I felt really envious of the futures that they were all planning for. I felt envious of their agreement on a particular piece of furniture. I even felt envious of the arguments that people were having about what something might look like in the corner of their lounge. We'd never do that. We'd never have the opportunity to sort of pick furniture out for our home that we liked. And suddenly, and without any warning whatsoever, I was totally overcome. I went white. I slipped away into the loo, not wanting him to know that anything was wrong. I threw up. My chest was tight. I couldn't get any air in. I couldn't stop crying. And the reality of what we had and of what we didn't have just became brutally obvious in the bedroom section in IKEA. And for 20 minutes, I kind of fought to compose myself, conscious that he was still wandering around outside. And he knew something was up. So we left without the things that we'd gone in for. And we sat on the car park in silence, and finally he broke the quiet and admitted that he'd felt that too. He'd felt that loss of a future. And I think it was the first time that he'd seen me stumble on something like that as well. It sent me into a week of absolute darkness. I got no energy, I got no motivation, I couldn't sleep, but I was eternally tired. But eventually his tenacity to try and make the most of the time that we got left kind of pulled me out of that spiral. It's the first time I'd ever experienced it, being honest, and it was pretty frightening. But the time went by, and we kind of made like ostriches and stuck our head in the sand. We filled the days with enjoyable distractions, and on occasions the real world would creep into that space and remind us of its reality: temperature spikes, vomiting, a nosebleed, or an emergency infusion of platelets. But largely we cracked on. Christmas came and New Year, and we had to celebrate it. It was his last one. But that made celebrating it really difficult. How do you welcome in a year that you know is going to rob you of so much? And that was really hard. And considering how much the time during treatment had dragged, and the time awaiting results had dragged, the time that got us towards the end just happened really quickly. And it was on the morning of the 10th of January. I held his hand and he slipped away. And I went back to his home with his parents, minus the physical link that brought us all together. But that feeling of duty that I had to stay strong seemed to transfer from him to his family. And I tried my best, but a month into that, I wanted home. I wanted my family, I wanted my friends, I wanted my old bedroom. So I packed up the remains of our life, that life that had never really started, and sort of headed back up north, back to the Midlands where I lived. And then it all happened. At home, in my room, that darkness returned, and I couldn't face seeing anybody. I couldn't face talking to anybody. I'd got no reason to get out of bed. I'd got no confidence, no spark, no energy, no purpose. I bumbled around my mother's house in my mid-20s with nothing but a fish tank and a few £1,000s worth of debt that I'd racked up by not working and trying to live a life's worth of weekends in a few short months. And then a flippant comment from a very well-intentioned bystander just triggered a complete step change in my mental state. And it was one of those comments of, of course I know exactly how you feel. And I totally lost control. I screamed and I shouted at people. I verbally and emotionally abused members of my family. I shook with raw emotion and absolute adrenaline. I hyperventilated. I disappeared with absolutely no consideration for the people that loved and cared about me. And I came to rest in this suicidal numbness. I felt like a burnt out husk of the human being that I used to be. And I just slept and I slept. And I wouldn't really speak to anyone unless I had to. And even when I did interact, I'd say it was a vacant act of what a person should do in social interactions. The one thing that I did have was a blog that Andy had done throughout his illness. And I read back over that. I pored over the words, and I actually realised that between the lines of what he was saying were the instructions for what I needed to do. So, accept there's a problem, seek help, treat it as if it were a disease, know that the treatment might not be easy, but trust the experts and let them guide me through it. And that's exactly what I did. I booked an appointment to see my doctor. She prescribed me with antidepressants. They didn't fix the problem, but they at least gave me enough headroom to start tackling the next steps, which was talking to someone. And I researched Mind. I read their self-help publications on what to do when you're in that state. I also reached out to Macmillan as well. They'd supported him through the disease, but they actually were also there to support me as kind of primary carer and widow, for want of a better word. And they put me in touch with a counsellor, And I talked through all the stuff that I'd hidden for all that time, all that time that I was keeping a brave face on, and all the things that I'd felt after he'd gone, some of which felt quite normal, some things felt really not normal at all. I started to socialise. I found new interests and I met new people. I started to build a new career from scratch. I went new places and I experienced new things. And it all started to feel a little bit better and a little bit like I could live in this world again in a meaningful way and actually kind of exist as a human being. And there are still moments that drag me back into that place. Looking after your mental health is really, really important. It's not a quick fix and it's not a one-time thing. Stress at work, financial pressures, friends and family issues, they can all trigger a lapse in your mental health again. Sometimes it's a feeling, other times it's a physical symptom of a mental ill health problem. Knowing how to spot the signs of that in yourself is really important, as is being able to recognise it in the people around you. The ability to ask people if they're okay and not always accept their first response is really important, as is getting comfortable with someone saying that they're not all right. That said, you don't have to have all the answers, and you shouldn't put yourself under the pressure of having all of the answers. But be proactive and look up where you can get the help from. It is out there. You never know when you might need it, and you never know when someone else might need it. And in my case, it also pays to avoid IKEA as well. Thanks.